the issue with language encoding. And
Yeah.
so what I wanted to say to start with, and this is not in the current presentation, is that language tagging, that is giving the computer representation of language data, be it written or oral, representation of the language is crucial for all sorts of application. That is language specific low-level tasks, such as many things you don't even think about depend on are language specific, even when for computer software agents that need to display textual data. For example, you need the language tagging to know whether you have to write from left to right or from right to left. You needed to know which shapes some letters should take within the sentence. This is mostly dealt with the latest version of the Unicode encoding scheme. That is before the end of the 20th century, it was a nightmare for linguists and computer linguists and people dealing with text encoding to deal with Arabic text, for example, because you had a code for each letter, but you can't actually read Arabic if you don't give the letter a correct shape it should have, whether it's depending on its position in the word, for example. So it's crucial for these types of low-level language-specific tasks, like hyphenating, for example. You don't hyphenate a text the same way in French or in German. Or even collation, that is the order. If you have to order a list in alphabetical order, it's not the same whether you use even in the Latin alphabet, for example, where there is a common order. It's not the same in French or in Spanish, because in Spanish you have the digraph LL, which is considered a specific entry in the dictionary. It's the same in Czech for CH or things like that. So in French, well, if you use an ordering algorithm that puts LL between LA and LU, it's not correctly ordered in Spanish, for example. And you need that too for other tasks that depend on language input. For example, you use a language input. You need to know the language for predictive input, next word prediction. You need to know the language for even for oral data, not written data, for example, for speech recognition. And of course, you need to know the language, and which is more interesting for language text corpora information. That is, if you want to do tasks such as text classification, text annotation, named entity recognition, spell checking, grammar checking, automatic translation, you need to know the language. So of course you can rely on language prediction, but there are clean ways to tag the language on the internet in digital data. So what are those? What is this clean way? Well, there is an attribute that has been defined first in the HTML standard, and then generalized in XML. XML is for those of you who don't know, it's extensible markup language. It's a very general standard for it's a meta language for defining markup languages. It's you can define with XML. You can define other markup languages for specific tasks. For example, HTML is the best known of all, but you can also define the text files that are generated by your text processing system are also an instance of XML, so you can do everything. And there is a very general attribute that has been defined at the level of XML. It's a lang attribute, which is supposed to encode the language. And so it's generally specified as XML :lang to include the namespace. That is, it's specify the fact that it's defined at the most general level. So, for example, if I use a docbook text file document type, you can specify the language of a document by using this tag. And so the key question is, what do you put in this language tag? So what's in the language tag? So there are multiple layers, multiple tiers of annotation of what should be in a language tag. And this has been the purpose of a lot of standards in the internet world. So it's assigned by all of this is in the memory of the IETF Internet Engineering Task Force, which is an international consortium which does not have the same status as the International Standards of Organization, because it's a consortium of industries, countries, and people who have a technical interest in standardizing the internet. And so a small group is dedicated to the best practice in encoding language. And so this IETF does not issue standards in the proper meaning of the word, like the International Standards Organization. It issues what they call RFC. So this exists since the beginning of the internet. It means request for comments. So on the internet, nothing is a standard. You just have requests for comments. So that's a document that engineers write to be commented by other engineers, and they keep evolving in time. And sometimes when there is a major version change, they give it a different number, but it's always a work in progress. And there are also a type of documents called BCP, Best Common Practice. And best common practices are a set of RFCs, so a set of low-level standards that are collected together and that give people instruction on what is the current best practice that you may use if you want to share your data and be the most interoperable with other systems. And so on the issue of language encoding, the norm, the standard, is defined by BCP 47, Best Common Practice 47, which collates a set of RFCs to define what you should put in a language tag. So the first level, actually, the kernel, is the language code itself. And so it's generally recommended to use one of the 2-letter or 3-letter language codes defined in the ISO 639, which is the standard for encoding languages, for language codes. And you have generally people use the 3 first levels, but they're up to 5 with different properties until now. I'll just talk about 1 and 3. So in the language code, you find the 2-letter codes, for example, German, French, English, Portuguese. Or in cases where you don't have 2-letter codes, because 2-letter codes are only for major languages, you may use 3-letter codes, alpha 3, as the name goes, that are encoded in that are defined in by the RFC 5646, which recommends the use of the codes of the ethnologue, which is has been defined by the SIL. I'll talk a little bit later about that. So, for example, you have a 3-letter code also for German and French, but you don't have one for Low Saxon or Upper Saxon, so you have to use neither NDS or SXU. Or for you in French, you don't have a code for the Picard dialect, so you have to use a PCD. You also have an optional country code. For example, if you want to distinguish British English and American English, you have to use the country code GB or US. You also have a 3rd layer, which is an optional script code. For some languages may be written in different scripts. For example, Yiddish in a Hebrew or Latin alphabet. Serbian, this is my example. Serbian may be written with Cyrillic alphabet or Latin alphabet. So in this case, you have a set of written script codes that may be appended to the language code. And you also have an optional variety code that may denote a variant of a language. And this is where it becomes quite controversial, because you don't have some languages don't have variants, or some have variants only when people have thought about it, so on. For example, variant codes. This is not on the slide, but variant codes that I have added to the language subtag registries in 2009 with the help of Bettina are variant codes for the what they called at the time Aucan or Duca dialect, and which we have succeeded in having it renamed Bushinenge Tongo. So it's a dialectal continuum in the in Western Suriname, with languages spoken by communities originally of slaves that have fled the plantations and founded their own villages. And there are many different dialects, and since only one had been studied by a linguist from SIL, it had the language code DJK for Juka, the Netherlands, the Dutch orthography for Juka, and it was considered one single language. So there were actually at least three dialects that needed to be identified for themselves. And so we now you can use DJK dash Aluku, or DJK dash Pamaka, or DJK dash Juka. So the language codes, the first authority to issue standards on dialect code is the International Body for Terminology and Terminological Standards. It's a part of the ISO, and it issues the ISO 639 #1, which originated firstly from the Library of Congress in Washington. Now the Library of Congress manages the #2, 639 #2, and the SIL has been put in charge of the management of the norm #3. The difference is that the two first were originally meant for users basically historically by librarians. That means they had an interest for indexing books, catalogs, and so on. And so mostly historically, the first language codes you find are language codes for countries and languages which have a printing industry. So what they call the major languages of the world. And so it has been expanded along the years to include many languages with widespread across the world, and especially in written form. And when the need arose to have a code for all the languages of the world, of course, 2 letters are not enough anymore. So they needed to have codes in 3 letters, and the 639 #3 has been invented for this purpose, to have a comprehensive list of known languages, including macro languages. That is, you have a code for Arabic or Chinese, but you also have a code for Mandarin Peking variant, or Mandarin Wuhan. And the thing is, well, I think I'll go back to it later. Who manages this code? When you have to add a variant for the country code, the recommendation in the computer industry is to use one of the country codes defined in the ISO 3166, which is the code for countries that that are the extensions on the internet that are well known. For example, GB for Great Britain, US for United States, and you can distinguish a German norm for in Germany and German norm in Austria, for example, by using the country code. And if you need, we had the case a couple of years ago within the project Bettina talked to you about. If you need something a little bit more fuzzy, for example, Spanish as spoken in the Caribbean islands, Puerto Rico and Cuba, then you can use one of the region codes that the United Nations have defined for big areas across the globe. So, for example, English from the Caribbean, Spanish from the South America, Spanish from the Caribbean, so on. The script code is also the object of a standard. You can read the number here, and it's used for languages, as I told you a little bit earlier, for languages that may use different scripts for their notation. And the variant code may denote. They are not part of an ISO standard. They merely exist in this international IETF registry. That means they only have an existence they only have an entry in this registry when they attract the attention of somebody who has a computer and wants them. For example, we wanted to have to be tag Pamaka in our corpora, so we wrote to the IETF task force and asked for the code Pamaka and got it registered. And so the only standardization organization is not a standardization organization as such. It's just a group of people who work. They are not even paid for it. They work as part of their time. They spend part of their time being active in a discussion list, which is a IETF language registry, and they discuss together the changes that have to be put within this big text file, which is called the IIANA language subtag registry. Sorry. So the variant code may denote several different things. So they may denote dialectal variety. For example, it has been used to distinguish Eastern Armenian from Western Armenian. They may be used to denote a variant of orthography. For example, the traditional German orthography from 1901, from the new one from 1996. And they may be used to distinguish, to add a distinction to the script code. For example, if you say you write your Chinese in Latin letters, you still have to tell the reader whether it's in pinyin transliteration scheme or Weijia or EFEO or whatever you want. So where do the standards come from? So the primary language subtags, they are standardized by the ISO. The best common practice tells you that you have to prefer the the two-letter code to the three-letter code when you have the choice. So if you want to tag there, you have the choice to tag German by DE or DEU, but you should use DE because you have the choice. And if you want to use Lower Saxon, of course, you have to use NDS because there is no two-letter code for Lower Saxon. So you have a standard, an ISO standard for country codes, for script codes. And yes, so I wanted to talk, and I had prepared the. I have no slide about that, but I will tell you. Where do the three-letter codes come from? So the ISO has trusted the SIL for the maintenance of the catalog of the ISO 639.3 standard. The SIL is the Summer Institute for Linguistics, and it has been entrusted with this task because it had a body of knowledge and a body of it had developed a catalog of living languages over the years. What is interesting is that the SIL is not originally an international organization like any other United Nations groups or task forces. SIL was founded in the United States in the 50s, and it's a faith-based, as they present themselves, faith-based international organization to develop language knowledge and literacy. And their main goal historically, and it still is up to now, is Bible translation. So it's an organization that mostly was created at the beginning to bring the Bible to any type of different languages in the world. So that means if you want to change something in your language tag, for example, to say first, the tags that are, when they are created by linguists that are active that are collaborating with the SIL, and that have published articles with and corresponded with the SIL. And the SIL has developed a catalog of all living languages in the world, which is called Ethnologue, where they try to collect, to bring together information about where the languages are spoken, what is their geographical extension, to which they have some sort of a genealogical tree of all languages, and they try to maintain this. But their knowledge is often partial, and it's often, as I've experienced, as I've myself have seen, for the languages I had a particular interest in Creole languages of French-based Creole languages of the Caribbean or of French Guiana, or in the Eastern Maroon Creole languages of Suriname. They often are based, their first, the entries in the catalog often is based by the place where the first missionary went to teach the Bible to children. So, for example, this is why you had Juka and you had no other dialect like Boni or Aluku, because the first guy from the seal went to and met people who self-described their dialect as Juka. So he used the colonial orthography in Dutch, and he said the language was Juka. Okay. And for example, in the case of French-based Creole dialects of the Lesser Antilles, of French West Indies, of the West Indies, sorry, the language which is common to the islands of Dominique, Saint Lucia, and Martinique was officially denoted ACF, Antillean Creole French, and its description was Saint Lucian Creole French, because a missionary from the SIL went to Saint Lucia, when there are actually a lot more people speaking this language in Martinique than in Saint Lucia. So you see, it's printed, it's loaded with ideology from the start. And where is the catalog for language subtags? It's in the big text file, which is here, and which brings together all sorts of different and it has all sorts of, it brings together all sorts of different languages. Now, I'm sorry, I can't, I don't have I wanted to create a beautiful tag cloud to show you this, but I haven't had time. But what is very interesting is that you have an archive. So most decisions concerning these subtags, so for example, which language variant subtags shall we allow? On what grounds? With which semantics? With which extension? Are mostly decided by a group of people who are who work together within the frame of a mailing list. So this catalog is mainly the collective production of a mailing list of people who have a common interest, a common hobby, so to say, in encoding languages in the internet. And most of them are English-speaking people who live in the United States. So it's very interesting. If you look at the archive of this list is public. You can consult it on the internet, and if you group the number of articles of messages by the number of contributors, you will find that 20 people have authored 80% of the contributions on that mailing list. And so there are 20 people who very nice people. I don't mean to be to be negative, but it's very funny to realize that 20 people who have a hobby, and some of them are retired. They have a hobby in participating in this mailing list and deciding which is good and which language subtag is good or bad, and so they decide which variant should be allowed. And there was a very interesting message in this list a couple of years ago of somebody saying it's as a user, computer system user, I would like to have a possibility to tag the linguistic data in a rational way, and not only on a list that has been created by people who have a partisan interest in bringing forward the language that they are interested in. For example, the example he gave was very interesting. There is a language variant in this list, which is Scouse for British English. It's the English dialect from Liverpool. And he said, who decided that there should be a variant for Scouse and not for Geordie or Brimmy or anything? And actually, it's because somebody had a personal passion in describing the dialect of Liverpool, and took the time of writing something about this. And nobody bothered about writing a rational for putting Geordie into the registry. And another interesting remark he made was that the country subtags, for example, ENGB and ENUS, do not correspond to anything in dialectology. ENGB is a set of orthographical norms that are widespread in the United Kingdom, and for most of them in Ireland. And ENUS is a set of orthographical norms that are common in North American English in its written form. And you have no way of tagging something. You have a way of tagging something as British English Scouse, which has not much meaning, because actually if you want to tag the fact somebody is using the dialect of Liverpool, it's nearly independent of the way that he uses British orthography instead of American orthography. But you have no way of saying that somebody is writing in English to represent linguistic data which is a Geordie dialect of northeastern England. So this is mostly what I had to say about this. This is the state of the art of how language is encoded on the internet. So sorry for the improvised presentation. I'm ready to hear any questions or any further discussion on the subject.
Thank you very much, Pascal. This was really very exciting.